Thank you so much for coming to this campus forum today. All of us have been shaken by the recent events on our campus. And this last meeting of the Senate on May 14th was a time for the President to address the Senate and the university, and then for the Senate to respond. And that response has come in a number of forms, all of them that I've seen calling for action going forward, and action that is, in one sense or in several senses, initiated by the Senate and by the entire constituency makeup of the Senate. For those of you who are not aware, this is not just a faculty Senate. This is a Senate of 5 constituencies: faculty, students, officers of administration, officers of research, and classified staff. We represent 30,000 people. And that's very important for all of us to remember, because this is our university. This is our university. And all of us today are working together to go forward on these very challenging issues that face us. The reason that this forum was called for today is because, first of all, we need to address these issues together in a very direct, clear, and compassionate way, and then we need to effect action. We have a meeting on May 28th where there will be several motions presented that relate directly to the events that have happened on our campus over the last, well, not just few weeks, but many years. So first let me give you a history so everybody here understands what we're doing today and how this came to be in this form. First, I want to let you know that this is being live streamed, and there are many people watching. Also, we will post the video of this meeting. Usually that turnaround time through the office that does that is 3 to 7 days. But we are going to make a special request that that be speeded up, so we hope to have the video posted very quickly. This meeting is actually leading to a legislative process. To make it clear for everybody, the Senate has the authority to make resolutions, make legislation, and also, through our system of shared governance, to make policy in collaboration with the central administration and others who bring policies forward. This is according to our Constitution, our bylaws, and the policy on policies. All of those documents are posted on the Senate website, so you should feel free to consult them and see what the actual process for action is through the Senate. It's very clearly spelled out through these documents. At the May 14th meeting, the actual call for this meeting was a kind of collaboration. I had first suggested it, and then Senator Michael Dreiling proceeded to make a very moving statement that then carried the dialogue forward, ultimately resulting in an agreement to have this campus forum and to make a motion on May 28th that will lead to greater collaboration and greater action. I'm going to read Michael Dreiling's statement because I think we all need to be aware of how this very forum came to be. Michael couldn't be here today because he's at a doctoral defense. I want to speak to the point that President Gottfredson raised about owning it. And to me, this is a bigger issue, and I think we need to own it. All of us here on this campus. It's not just the administration here. I'm hearing from dear colleagues from all corners of the campus their deep concerns. This is a sobering moment. We are having a very real conversation here with a very real issue that has been magnified by an incident. But this one incident isn't it. This is an ongoing issue. I mean, the Air Force is dealing with this issue, and of course every major institution in this country is dealing with this issue. I'm not interested in a resolution that in any way deflects responsibility, and I'm also not interested in a resolution that really tries to pin some specificity to this case. I'm interested in the Senate making a bold statement about we as faculty, we as a university, working together in our shared governance model to really tackle this, and that we are going to own the mistakes, own the oversights, own the slow processes, and own the failures at deliberation that we've made. We're going to own it. If we can make a resolution to that effect, and that we can then be partners, that we can be partners in addressing this sincerely, heartfully, for our students and for the future of our institution, then yes, I'm with it. So that's where I'm putting my voice on this, and it may be a simple statement that we have not done enough for this issue. We have not. And now it's time. It's time. It's a wake-up, and I think President Gottfredson also pointed this out. We can't be bystanders either in the Senate. We've got to be proactive, as with the student body. So I'll stop there. And he didn't stop there. We continued the dialogue, and then I proposed this campus forum, and this campus forum for the purpose of together considering this motion and speaking about issues related to this motion so everybody can have a voice in this. There are many senators here and the members of the Senate Executive Committee, and those people in particular are here to listen closely to you as you participate, because it's our university, and to craft legislation that will have meaning and value and that will be sustainable into the future. That is our purpose today. So I would first like to show you Michael Dreiling's original version, which is here and has been posted on our website. It was sent to you through the email outreach. And because it's important for us to understand what's being proposed, if you would just take a look at this, I'm going to give everybody a chance to just look at it, and then I'm going to read the revised version that has now come forward through discussion on the Senate listserv, discussion with very many people around campus and so forth. Just take a look at this to begin, and then I'll read the revised version that we'll be looking at today as a starting point for our discussion. So this was the first step in posting this, and Michael Dreiling drafted this. We owe him a debt of gratitude for taking that initiative, putting it forward so then everybody could begin to have a discussion. Next, we collected all of the input through the Senate listserv and whatever other input was offered, because of course this was posted on the website, so other people also contributed who are not in the Senate. And here's the red line version, just so you could see the process. I want it to be absolutely transparent for everyone here. And I want to thank Lisa Mikshimizu, our Senate Executive Coordinator, for working so hard to coordinate all these materials. It's been a very short time and quite a task. We've worked together on that. So you don't have to read this, because I'm going to read it in a version that takes out all of the cross-outs and so forth, but you can see that there were many suggestions, and these were incorporated, every one of them that we had, in a timely manner. There will be time for more participation today, and then before the Senate meeting on May 28th. That Senate meeting, as for all Senate meetings, that's an open meeting. You're very welcome to attend and participate on May 28th as well. So now, from that version, we took out the redlining and also the crossouts, and here is the version that we will use as the beginning of our discussion, as a focus. Section 1, 1.1. Whereas sexual violence and sexual harassment at universities are part of a national problem, and that these problems are also present at the University of Oregon. And 1.2. whereas the UO must take measures to address the problem of sexual violence and the needs of survivors of sexual violence on and off our campus. And 1.3, whereas many questions remain unanswered with the alleged sexual assault on March 8th through the 9th and the university's response to that incident. And 1.4, whereas the UO's Student Conduct Code requires sustained and focused attention by students, the University Senate, and the University President as it relates to this matter, and that revisions to this code must be done through the UO Senate. And 1.5, whereas the university's financial commitment to ending sexual violence and supporting survivors of sexual assault at the UO remains unspecified and without needed transparency. And 1.6, whereas the University Senate acknowledges the lack of transparency regarding recent cases of sexual assault and the lack of a university-wide initiative to fully engage all of the university community in efforts to reduce sexual violence on campus and off campus, and the limited support that has been provided to survivors of sexual violence, and acknowledges its obligation to address these problems. Section 2. Let me point out that the whereas is not what we actually vote on. We vote on this Section 2. But the whereas is essentially a preamble that frames the motion. So Section 2, 2.1, be it hereby moved that a task force to end sexual violence and support survivors is formed to study the strengths and limitations of the university's response to recent incidents of sexual violence, and based on those assessments to initiate sustained, proactive changes aimed at ending sexual violence and supporting survivors of sexual violence. And 2.2, be it further moved that this task force is formed no later than June 6, 2014, consisting of no fewer than 2 elected members of the University Senate, 2 other members of Senate constituencies, 2 additional nominees recommended by the UO-CESV, 2 students, and a member of the university administration, all to be appointed by the Senate President, and that the meetings of this task force shall be open to the university community except as required by privacy laws. And be it further moved that this task force shall work with the University Board of Trustees, the ASUO, the University President and Administration, and the Senate's constituencies to report on initial findings and initial recommendations for action by the second Senate meeting of fall 2014. So this is a topic for discussion. This is not a final version of legislation. It's to help us frame and focus our comments. And also people are very welcome to bring up other issues that relate to this, but to help us to focus as much as we can on moving forward in a timely and meaningful way that focuses on sustainable action, sustainable into the future. It's very, very important. So what we have done is to have a speakers list that you were asked to sign up on if you wish at the door. And we have on the speakers list right now, let's see, 10 names. What we'll do is call people up to the microphone, and we'll alternate a few people speaking from the microphones with hands. So those who raise hands, we're going to carry a microphone to you. Between these 2 methods, we should be able to accommodate everybody, so you all get a chance to speak, those who would like to speak. So I think we'll now proceed. On the speakers list, I've got Carol Stabile. Is Carol here? Carol, please. And then I have Jennifer Fried. Jennifer, if you would come to this microphone. And I'm also going to ask the second and third people to come up. Megan Burke. Megan, please, if you could come to this side. Claire Aubin, or Aubin, if you could come to this side so we could just... and then I've got Rich Marjoram. That would be fine. And let me see if I hope I'm reading this correctly. Rosenling? Oh, thank you. If you could come to this side. I'm sorry, I didn't read this properly. I had Carly Smith should be on this side, and Krista Chronister on this side as well. I was trying to go back and forth between two lists. So this is great. If you could please be ready to speak when the time comes. We start with Carol Stabile.
Hi, I'm Carol Stabile. I'm director of the Center for the Study of Women in Society and a professor in the School of Journalism and Communication in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies. I wasn't able to hear Michael Gottfredson's comments to the Senate last week. I read them, however, and I want to offer an important perspective, I think, on the problems that we're confronting. Last week, the president described our concerns as speculative and inappropriate. They are not. Student safety has been compromised on the UO campus, as well as far too many campuses around the country. 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted while she is at UO. Roughly 600 of those young women currently enrolled as students have been or will be victims of sexual assault. It's disingenuous and dangerous when administrators suggest otherwise. Efforts to address sexual violence on college campuses have been underway at UO and elsewhere for many years. My experiences dealing with sexual violence began shortly after I arrived at the University of Oregon. My second autumn here, one fraternity paraded a flatbed truck of shirtless men with the words tits and vag scrawled on their torsos around campus. The next day, the word cunt was written on the doors of 2 campus buildings. A number of us wrote to the Dean of Student Affairs. We were told that they knew which fraternity was involved in, quote, the situation, as they referred to it, and they had discussed the need to develop, quote, new and healthy traditions. In the months following, colleagues teaching gender-related classes and students told me additional stories about fraternity culture here. There were rape rooms in specific frats that women were told to avoid. And there were safe rooms where women presumably could go to avoid being raped. In the years that followed, the 10 graduate students disclosed incidents of sexual assault and harassment to me. 2 wound up leaving UO. Increasingly alarmed by their accounts, in December 2012, I sent a letter to the then new president of UO, Michael Gottfredson, expressing my concerns. The letter, and I'm more than happy to provide copies of that letter to anyone in this room, began by saying, "This is my 5th year at UO, and I have become increasingly concerned about the university's handling of sexual assault and sexual harassment cases." I told him that I had observed a pattern, quote, that suggests deep and serious procedural problems that, if not addressed, will certainly erupt at some point. Senior administrators in charge of policies, I wrote, were, quote, too close to the problems or too defensive about the way we've already always done things and lack the critical perspective to deal with the problems. These patterns continue today. The president wants to move forward in addressing sexual violence on campus, and I'm all for that. But we're not going to move forward by identifying whistleblowers as the problems, a pattern emerging here that verges dangerously on retaliation. We're not going to move forward by blaming faculty for problems that need to be laid at the feet of our leadership. Moreover, and against what Michael wrote in his introduction, we do not all share equal responsibility for creating a culture free from sexual harassment, violence, and intimidation. We're not, as one member of our campus community suggested, all part of the problem. The women and men who've been pressing the administration for change are not the problem. I have never raped anyone. I've never sexually harassed anyone. I've not made excuses for rape-supportive subcultures. The feminists who came together before the recent sexual assault case months in advance of this case have devoted their careers to creating spaces where faculty, students, and staff feel safe and welcomed. We are not part of the problem. According to President Gottfredson, this is a time when it's important for us to come together as a campus, a community, to make our university stronger, safer. But how are we to come together when the UO administration, over-rehearsed either by legal counsel or their PR people, won't even admit that there's a problem, much less look the problem in the face? We need an investigation that is fully independent of the influence of big sports or the Greek system. We need an investigation that can ask the hard questions about systemic breakdowns in our policies, procedures, and campus climate. And then we need to look the answers in the face publicly and bravely. Anything less just isn't going to cut it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comments. The reason the lights are going on and off is because there are light switches here and there, and people are leaning against them. So it's a kind of collaboration of humanity and technology to try to keep the light on. Keep the light on. Next is Jennifer Fried.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Fried. I'm a professor in the psychology department, and I'm going to just turn this a little so I can look at everybody. I have been researching sexual violence for over 20 years as part of a research program, and the original research really focused on one-on-one sorts of events, but as the research developed, we began to be interested in institutional context of sexual violence. And in the summer of 2010, I was very, very fortunate to get a remarkable graduate student, Carly Smith, who's actually standing right here, and I'm glad she's going to talk to you. And she arrived in the summer of 2010, and she said, I think we should really do a study on institutional betrayal, a term we had just been starting to toss around in the laboratory. Let's get some data. And we talked, we took long walks, and we tried to figure out how to do it. At the time, military context seemed to be a good idea, but it's hard to do that. And she had a first-year project requirement. And she said, well, what about college? Could college be a place where we might see institutional betrayal? And I thought, well, I've heard stories from students over the years, but it must be kind of rare. Colleges are wonderful places. But I said, we can give it a try. It's research. So we developed some measures, and we did a study, and we discovered institutional betrayal. But while we were doing it, we collected all the data at the University of Oregon. But did we think we were studying the University of Oregon? No. We were doing what we do as researchers. We use the University of Oregon and this community as our resource base, and we run studies with participants here. But we were studying a phenomenon that we sort of saw in national terms. Our research got published. It took 3 years, as happens. In February 2013, it was published in a very good journal after peer review. In that time, the national conversation had changed. There'd been Penn State. And when our research came out, it received a fair amount of attention because we showed an effect of institutional betrayal on the well-being of students. And by this I mean things like creating an environment in which it seems like no big deal that we looked specifically at response to sexual assault, or responding in a way to punish those who attempt to make a report. So our research got published, we got some publicity, and then I started to get phone calls and emails from people in the community who said, I think there's a particular problem at the University of Oregon. And I was like, really? I think the University of Oregon is just sort of normal, and I don't know. And people started to tell me stories, and I started to get copies of letters people had written to the administration. Colleagues showed me letters they had written addressing this problem. And I want to just read from one of the letters that I got. I got permission today to read from this. This letter is from Cheney Ryan, who actually has written many letters, but this was one that was written in September 2012, just a few months before Carol Stabile's letter. And he started out, currently the University of Oregon fails to comply with its obligations under Title IX regarding sexual harassment and its discriminatory impact on students. Attempts by faculty to get the administration to address this issue have been met with indifference, annoyance, and hostility, but mainly indifference. And then he goes on for 4 pages explaining the failure to be in compliance with Title IX and particular incidents. And then he says near the end, we cannot wait until a Penn State type incident occurs before we take these issues seriously. And that letter was written in 2012. I felt it was my duty to talk to my university about the research that we had found, and the rate of sexual assault, as well as the rate of institutional betrayal, as well as all these things I was hearing from people. And so I emailed President Gottfredson in March 2013 and asked for a meeting, which happened in May 2013. And at that meeting, I brought my graduate student collaborators, both Carly and Marina Rosenthal, who's a newer student who was doing work on this, and we presented President Gottfredson with a page-long summary of our research findings, because by then we had many studies that were relevant, all conducted at the University of Oregon. And again, we hadn't really set out to study the University of Oregon, we just had as part of our research activity. And I also gave him a copy of Cheney Ryan's letter, which he told me he had seen already. At that meeting, I said my overall impression was the University of Oregon was kind of middle of the pack for college campuses. And he said to me at that meeting that no, he thought we were actually below the middle. And I thought, great, this is great. He gets it. We're going to get some change going on. I then started a really long series of emails and invitations to collaborate. I was very hopeful at the beginning. And a lot of the right things were said to me, but I did not get the follow-through that resulted in actual cooperation. I was assured I'd be given access at some point in there to resources, in particular email addresses, to allow me to do an employee survey. That dragged on and dragged on and dragged on to the point where I had to launch the survey using email addresses I got through public records requests because the right words were said, but I was never given them. And in the meantime, I knew that we needed to look at the effect of the online required training, and I was working under a clock. So my sense from this was that the right words were said, but the administration was not coming through with actual actions. And I think that's exactly the pattern that others have experienced, although sometimes there's just no word said at all. The number of us were so concerned about the lack of response that in December we started to meet on a regular basis. We formed a coalition in January, and we started to work really hard. We spent our weekends and our nights working, and we started to research institutional practices and behaviors. We found out through rumors from students that there was a report, now known as the Groves Report. And we asked for that Groves Report, which was an assessment of how the university's handling these issues. It's a quite important report to read, but we had to get it because we found out about it from rumors. We learned about the Sexual Misconduct Journal, which was an assignment given to students who are actually found guilty of sexual misconduct. And we had to work hard to find out, what is this Sexual Misconduct Journal? Finally, we found it. It was a set of essays that some students are asked to write. It is actually a very common sanction. We were alarmed at these essays when we read them at the assignment. We wrote and expressed our response back in March and have not received an answer to that expression of alarm. We actually argued that it's going to do more harm than good, these particular assignments, based on what we know. We researched many things, and we were working really hard. In the meantime, the White House put together a task force addressing these issues. It was exciting for us to see that there was this national support out there, and it turned out that I got to be invited and go to talk to them, and as well as be there when they announced their first report. And at the same time, I ended up being invited to talk to Senator Gillibrand, and she asked me to send her various materials. All this was happening through March and April. And although I was frustrated that we hadn't gotten responses, I was still basically trusting our administration for how they were handling matters. On May 5th, during the day, I started to get calls from the press. We hear there's something going on with a sexual assault case and basketball players. Do you know about it? I was like, no. But I started checking Google News, because if reporters are calling me asking about it, something's happening. So we were actually at my house. I was with my graduate students. We were working on documents for Senator Gillibrand, and the news came out. And we read the police report, and we tried to put together the timeline. And all those conversations we'd been having with the administration and put it all together. We were just astonished and very saddened. And our coalition started to communicate, and we wrote a statement that night to express some of our sadness and our absolute horror at what we were beginning to understand had occurred here. You all know since May 5th what's happened. It's been very publicized. But to us, this didn't start May 5th. It was a betrayal to us, no question. But it was following a whole history and a pattern of activities I want you to know about. And the last thing I want to say is, what do we assess when we look at institutional betrayal in detail? And I want to juxtapose that with something that President Gottfredson said 1 week ago in this room. President Gottfredson said, "Some have speculated that we're not acting in the best interest of the university. and that student safety has been compromised, or that we turn a blind eye toward misconduct, or that we would tolerate for one moment sexual violence and intimidation on our campus. These assumptions are patently false, and speculations are very, very inappropriate. Now I want to read to you a few of the examples of items from our institutional betrayal questionnaire that we wrote in 2010. This is students would tell us if they'd had the experience of making it difficult to report, this is students who had been sexually assaulted, making it difficult to report the experience, responding inadequately to the experience if reported, mishandling your case if disciplinary action was requested, covering up the experience, denying your experience in some way, punishing you in some way for reporting the experience, e.g. loss of privileges or status, suggesting your experience might affect the reputation of the institution, creating an environment where you no longer felt like a valued member of the institution. You know, I'm so glad the Senate's doing what it's doing, and I'm so glad you're all in the room. It is absolutely our duty. It's our duty as faculty members, when we have research that's relevant, to bring it to the administration and to this community. And it's now our duty to not forget the history that brought us here, to move forward and fix things for the future, holding that history in our hearts and in our mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next on the speakers list is Megan Burke.
Hi, I am a PhD student in the philosophy department, and I've also taught many classes in the WGS department directly related around the issue of sexual violence. Prior to coming back to do graduate work, I worked as a victim support advocate relating to sexual violence and domestic violence. So this issue is at the heart of my work. My concern today is just to raise a question and perhaps a problem around the framing of the discussion in the Senate as the way in which action is moving forward. So I think this is important to draw attention to, particularly because of the claims made against those of us doing coalition work to actually make this environment inclusive and also feminist-friendly in relationship to sexual violence work. And that has to do with a response particularly to a claim made by Michael Draling. So my statement is really about this claim and a more general claim made by the University Administration Department, or about the University Administration's orientation to moving forward, right? So we obviously all want action going forward, and the way in which this is framed by both Draling, the Senate, and the UO administration is pretty clear, is that we are not going to focus on the specificity of the particular case at hand. And I have a problem with this. So the problem with that is this. So this position as a survivor and a supporter of survivors of sexual violence and rape is pretty egregious, because we know that specificity and particularity in instances of sexual violence matter very much. So when we claim that we are going to move forward generally, and we talk about a general environment, creating a general environment that is free of rape culture, we are not actually addressing the particularity of instances of sexual violence, the actual particularities that make up the content of the environment in which we live. So this is a huge problem, because therefore we neglect the specific cases, right? We allow them to be put behind us, and the people that want to, right, confront those particular cases are claimed to be making speculative claims and are actually not taken seriously. So the importance of specificity, rather than just generality, moving forward in a general way, is highly problematic from the perspective, right, of those of us who are actually trying to do something to create a new environment and ameliorate this huge problem. So as we move forward, we should be very careful about how we frame that, because as Jennifer just said, if we frame it generally, then we forget the history that has made this condition of our present possible.
Thank you very much. And I want to be clear about the process, just so everybody knows. When Michael provided that first draft, it was meant to be a beginning point for discussion and to actually hopefully help all those who would enter into that discussion to bring forward their various points. The result so far, we're in the middle of the process, is this version that I read. And everyone is welcome to add their comments. So we take this as a very serious comment that you've just made, and all of the comments that we hear today. We're taking notes on them. We will integrate them into the process. What will eventually happen with this is there will be an owner or sponsor for the motion, and that person will present it in the Senate. There'll be further discussion and then vote. So again, you're all welcome to the May 28th meeting, and we will stay in close touch as the motion evolves. We'll be sending out versions of it so you can interact. Next on the speakers list is Claire Aubin. Or is it Aubin?
Aubin.
Aubin. See, I got it wrong both times.
Okay.
Claire Aubin.
So as you heard, I'm Claire Aubin. I'm the PR coordinator for the ASUO Women's Center, as well as a student member of the Safer Education campaign, and I'm here to talk on behalf of an additional demand made by the UO Coalition that's not necessarily addressed in the current resolution, and that is the creation of a multicultural credit requirement in regards to sexual inequity and other inequalities like that. And so I'm going to read a testimony by Anna Bird, the former editor of the Siren feminist magazine on campus and another student member of the Safer Education campaign. Excuse my cell phone usage. 4 years ago, I came to the University of Oregon from a small rural town in eastern Oregon. For 18 years, I had grown up with a very different perspective on the world. My first term, I enrolled in Women's and Gender Studies 101, and it changed my perspective beyond compare. I realized I had been a feminist my whole life, never having had the language to acknowledge that. From there, I went on to volunteer for the Women's Center, help plan Take Back the Night, write for the Siren, and my perspective on the world continued to change and grow. Before I came to the University of Oregon, before I took that WGS 101 class, before I got involved with the Women's Center, I participated in rape culture. I laughed at rape jokes even though I knew they were wrong. I didn't know what a healthy and positive sex life looked like. I thought that if I put myself in an uncomfortable or unhealthy situation, then it was my own fault. I didn't want to be considered a tease. I criticized my friends for having an active sex life. Needless to say, after the first WGS class, and I became thoroughly involved with the Women's Center, I had to take a hard look at how my own actions were contributing to the culture around me. I had to accept that I had participated in rape culture, and I took contentious steps to change that. But I wouldn't have been able to make those changes if it hadn't been for education. I learned what consent was. I learned what consent wasn't. I learned that no matter what situation I put myself in, no one had a right to have sex with me unless I enthusiastically consented. I learned the harm rape jokes can do, the harm in not believing a survivor. I learned how to cultivate a healthy, empowering sex life and encourage my friends to do the same. I became an active disruptor of rape culture, and I couldn't have done that if it hadn't been for a change in perspective. I know in my heart that if more people are required to take a class like Women's and Gender Studies 101, their perspectives will change too, for the better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And by the way, that proposal was sent around, and we've seen the proposal, and we're now trying to connect the people who want to put that forward to exactly the right people through which it can move forward in the system of bringing it into some form that it can be presented, and I guess it would be decided on by the appropriate office. So we didn't exactly know what that process was, and I think we're just about there to understanding what it is. So the fifth person is Rich Marjoram.
Thank you. My name is Rich Marjoram. Oops. Closer. I am on the University Senate. I'm also on the Senate Executive Committee, and I'm primarily here just to listen. And actually, I really appreciate what's been shared already. And some of this Rob's already reiterated, but I just want to emphasize I've been involved in this discussion that's been going around with the emails trying to craft this. And what I would really urge is these ideas that you're presenting here to make sure these get forwarded to the appropriate people in the Senate or Senate Executive, because we want to make this as effective of a process as possible. I think that I feel really embarrassed for the Senate for for many of us that it took an incident like this to raise this issue to such a high degree. But I also don't want to focus on only one incident. My concern is that if we just focus on one single incident, we will lose this, as many of you have already articulated, a really severe and chronic problem. I really appreciate the comment about the importance for specificity. And I think that's really something that we need to take on board. But I think what I'm hearing is there's a lot of specificity of a lot of events that need to be taken into account. So I'm really here to listen to this conversation and think about how can this be as effective as possible. As Rob mentioned, the University Senate is a very unique body in the fact that we are representative of all the sectors of the university. And I think that this is what the University Senate should be doing. It should be serving as a forum for airing these kind of issues from across a range of different sectors and asking challenging questions and putting these forward. So I really appreciate all these comments and feedback, and I hope you would continue to sort of forward these details and ideas to the Senate so that this can be the most effective forum as possible. I also have to think, as we looked at this sort of legislation and the charge and so forth, that this is also maybe a very unrealistic time frame. When I hear about the extent and issues and concerns and so forth, obviously there's a need for urgency, but I also think there's a need for careful deliberation to bring out all these ideas. So again, I'm primarily here to listen, but I really want to encourage people to put forward these and think about how can this be structured as effective as possible to bring about real change. So thanks.
And just so everybody is aware, every part of the motion is up for discussion. There isn't anything that's off the table. So if you don't think the time frame is good, if you have other concerns, we welcome your input. It's very important. This is our university. It belongs to every one of us. And it's our responsibility together, collectively, to go forward in a way that is meaningful and sustainable. And I want to make sure we all understand it has to be sustainable into the future. We can't lose sight of this ever again. Next is Carly Smith.
Hello, everybody. I also will look at you. So my name is Carly Smith, and as you heard earlier, I came to the University of Oregon in 2010. What that has meant is I have overlapped almost entirely with the class of 2014. They came in as freshmen when I showed up here, and many of them will be graduating in just a couple weeks. Carol mentioned that 1 in 5 women will experience sexual assault over the course of their college career. I think about that statistic, and I think about who will not be walking across the stage in a few weeks because they've left the university, because they fell behind in class and won't be done in time to walk with their friends, because they don't want to commemorate their time at the UO. Maybe they'd rather forget it entirely. These are all outcomes of sexual assault. These are all outcomes that we've measured as part of our research that Jennifer introduced. I'm a researcher first, and I have data to fuel these musings. In the 4 years I've spent here, I've researched institutional betrayal related to sexual assault. Institutional betrayal is what we call institutional failures to prevent or respond effectively to sexual violence. I started out, as you heard, my first year here shaping this idea, creating a measure, and wondering what we would find if we asked students here about institutional betrayal. So in the fall of my first year, we surveyed students, as you've heard, mostly freshmen and sophomore. These are who are in our subject pool. We asked about sexual assault, institutional betrayal, and psychological outcomes. We found an overwhelming rate of sexual violence. Already, these 18, 19-year-old students had been victims of a variety of unwanted sexual experiences, nearly half of whom reported institutional betrayal. And for those who reported this type of betrayal, much worse outcomes. The most common type of betrayal was creating an environment where sexual assault seemed common, like no big deal, or even more likely to occur. The most common institution reported was a university or a related institution, like a Greek system. So our research has continued over the intervening years, And we soon realized, as you heard, that while we were meaning to understand this thing, institutional betrayal, we were learning a whole lot more about our university. How often this happens, how often it happens here, which led us to change how we ask about sexual violence. We ask people now, did this happen at UO? And in these samples of freshmen, sophomore students typically, average age 19, 10 to 20% of those samples have already experienced sexual violence here. 30 to 40% already know someone who's experienced it here. We also have asked people what they do. When they experience this type of institutional betrayal, what do they do? We ask them if they stay or if they go. And here's where it gets tricky. We find that about 50% say they're no longer members of the institution who betrayed them. Well, for current UO students taking the survey, they've obviously not left the UO. They may have left a sorority or quit a team. You may also think, well, 50% of them stay. And you're right, they do. 50% stay. But what must they give up to stay at an institution that's betrayed them? What must they give up to stay at an institution that they no longer have reason to trust? What would it mean to try to heal from a trauma like sexual assault in this type of environment? So perhaps you understand my concern for these graduating seniors now. What graduation might mean for them. I wonder what they've learned at U of O about how institutions work. In some ways, I think about the recent publicized sexual assault as almost a final cram session before finals, before graduation, including those who've been lucky enough not to have a personal experience, or a friend, or a sibling, or a partner who's had their own. What lessons have we managed to fit into these last few weeks? And are they really the ones we mean to be teaching? Thank you.
Thank you. Just for transparency, I want to be clear. We've got 5 more on the speakers list. We could have some time for people to participate through raising their hand now, if you would like, or we could finish the speakers list. I'd just like to take a quick show of hands. How many would like to finish the speakers list, and then the rest of the meeting will focus on having hands raised? How many would favor that approach? And how many would favor having hands and then more speakers list? There are only 5 more left. So we'll finish the speakers list and then we'll go to hands. Thank you so much. There are empty seats, so for those who are here on the side, please come and take a seat. Could you raise your hand if you're near a seat? Please come in and sit down if you wish to. And here's the remaining order. So if these people could come to the microphone, it would help. Next will be, number 7 would be Krista Chronister. 8 is Roseanne Ling. 9 is Amy Jones and Caitlin Corona. 10 is Jeremy Headland. And 11 is Sarah Wire. So if you could come to the mics, that would be great, and we'll just proceed through the list. So next is Krista Chronister.
Thank you. My name is Krista Chronister. I'm an associate professor in counseling psychology. I also am a doc. I graduated and did all my doctoral work in counseling psychology here. So I've been on this campus since 1996. I'm also a licensed psychologist. I've had the privilege of doing my doctoral training at the University Counseling and Testing Center. And so I have worked with survivors, student survivors here on campus. I bring that perspective. I also bring 15 years of research on dating violence and intimate partner violence. So I'd like to add a couple of points from those perspectives. The first thing I want to say is that I want to reiterate that this isn't a wake-up call for many of us, that a lot of people in this room and on this campus have been fighting for student survivors and to address this issue for decades, many, many, many years. And what is quite an opportunity is that our president is a criminologist. And what we know very well, those of us who've been working in this field and for whom it is not a wake-up call, is that alcohol, so I want to broaden the language a little bit, alcohol and substance use from 16 to 24 increases dramatically. It spikes off the charts. Intimate partner violence and dating violence spikes dramatically during that same short period of time. Assault and harassment spikes during the exact same age period. And you put all of those risks on a college campus, and here we are. And I think that while we move forward as a faculty senate in addressing these issues and as a campus, we've got to think along those continua, in those circles, so that we have a more comprehensive understanding of what assault is about, what creating a culture of safety actually means. My second point is I'd like to make sure that we're talking about prevention as well as response and intervention, as well as culture and creating a culture that promotes safety. They're very different but related concepts. Those of us who've been doing this work, there are a lot of great people who've been trying to tease that out. And I think that our response to survivors is one dimension of this problem. Our response to those who have been accused is another response. Prevention programming is a different but related sphere. And then the kind of campus culture that we all promote is yet another. And so I'd like to make sure that our discourse while we move forward as a campus community includes that breadth in order to address this issue. The last thing I want to say is this is a timely, we have momentum. Those who've been doing this work for so long see this as a potential opportunity to gain momentum. It's time for all of us to respond and to push forward. Those who have felt they haven't been aware of these issues or potentially have ignored them, this is our time. And so while we respond, I hope that we can also use administrative power, faculty power, student, the union power to move forward in a timely manner, rather than getting bogged down, as was described last week during the faculty senate, of things like the changes to the student conduct code taking 11 years. So thank you.
Thank you. And also, just to be extra clear about this, I just received the speakers list that have remained outside. Some people came later, so there are 3 more names. The 12th person was John Bonine, then Carolyn Farrell, and then Bill, and I'm sorry, I can't read your last name, but Bill Harbaugh. Okay. It's very interesting, very creative. So next is Rosen Ling.
Okay. Hi, my name is Rosanna Ling, and right now I'm a senior education foundations major. I'm here because I'm in support of the campaign that Claire was talking about earlier, the Safer Education campaign. I believe that the University of Oregon should use this motion as also implementing it within the multicultural requirement via having a mandatory course for students. One, it'll educate students upon these issues, such as sexual violence, as well as multicultural issues, but as well as to create a space where students feel safe and are able to have their own experiences be within their classroom. Through my own classes within the education department, we have read multiple theorists that say that having such a course that would validate students' experiences do help students within the academic field, because they do feel like their experiences are being validated within the class. So I guess to wrap up my short speech, I really do believe that having a mandatory course about these issues will create a huge difference within the campus. It will educate students as well as validate the students' experience, creating a more diverse campus and then a more inclusive campus as well. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you. Next, Amy Jones and Caitlin Corona.
everyone. I'm Amy. Caitlin unfortunately had to leave for class a few minutes ago, so I'm going to be talking for both of us.
Actually, if you want to bring the microphone up a little, because you have to actually speak over the top of it or it won't be. Yeah.
Can you hear
Thank
me
you.
now? Is that better? Okay, good. So I am currently the ASCO Senate Vice President, and I was a member of the University Senate last year. Additionally, I am a member of the University of Oregon's Organization Against Sexual Assault, formerly known as the Sexual Violence Prevention Task Force, that was formed by former ASUO President Laura Hinman a few years back to address mostly how the university handles cases of sexual violence, including issues with mandatory reporting and how survivors feel about the policies that are currently in place. Since we have completed that task and created a lengthy report on our findings, we wanted to create a permanent organization to address these issues to focus on education and prevention of our peers. This year, we were able to secure almost $37,000 in funding from the ASUO to work on these issues on our campus next year. Mostly, we're going to be working on bystander intervention, which will ensure that our peers are not only being told to watch what's being put in their drink, but actually stopping issues of sexual violence before they happen. We have an issue on our campus that is not limited to these recent events. We are living in a rape culture at the University of Oregon that will not be solved overnight. The real problem and why we're here today is because all the other instances on our campus did not trigger this response. We should be proactive and not reactionary when we move forward. Let's stop excluding voices and work together to ensure the safety of students, faculty, and staff. Perspective from all outlets is valuable. In addition to our group, there's ASAP, SWAT, the UO Coalition to End Sexual Violence, the Office of the Dean of Students that has now 3 positions working on this issue who are all allies to us. In addition, you have the Survivor Empowerment Alliance and SAS, which is the community organization that provides valuable resources to our community on campus as well. OASA has concerns with the resolution at hand. We have no knowledge that the survivors of recent incidents want to be the figurehead moving forward. Let alone all the media coverage that has currently been thrown into the national spotlight. And when we make these people the figurehead, it also serves to diminish all the other instances of sexual assault on our campus, the ones that were reported and the ones that were not for various reasons. In addition, we want further clarification from how this specific task force is going to be different from all the groups currently working on this issue. Why should we have 8 other groups working separately on the issue of sexual violence when we can come together and make a bigger difference? On top of that, we were curious why the membership of this specific task force does not draw from the members who are currently serving the university on this issue. From our knowledge, certain administrators who work on this issue, as well as our group and other groups that are working on sexual violence, were not contacted, and we had to actively seek out how we can get involved, like in this public forum. We do realize that the U.S. Senate has valuable resources that can help us move forward as a community, though, and we call upon you all to help us develop the curriculum that will make our campus a safer place, but to gain this knowledge from the experts who have been working in this field for years. We're all very passionate about this cause, and this instance has triggered an overwhelming response, but we shouldn't be fooled that we're all experts on the issue immediately. There are many faculty, as you've already heard speak, that have been working on this issue for years, and I want to see their input in developing the curriculum, not what other people think is best. So just in summary, our ask is to include the membership from the people already working on it, take out the specifics until we're sure that certain survivors want to be made a figurehead, and further education through what students want to see to increase the multicultural requirement and tackle these issues in bystander prevention so we can move forward as a campus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and that's why we're having this forum, is to make sure we hear all of the voices. Thank you so much. 10 is Jeremy Headland.
Hi there, my name is Jeremy Headland. I'm going to be graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in Women's and Gender Studies very soon. But I'm up here to talk about two things. The first is my personal experience about why I think expanding the multicultural requirement is a very good idea. And the second is also to give some context for the experience that I think has been communally shared by a group of undergrads who have been pursuing this for the past couple of weeks. So first off, on my personal experience, I entered into the University of Oregon, I think, as many young men do, with a very unhealthy mindset about how sexuality works and about how dating and hooking up looks like in college. And if it really weren't for the sudden and swift intervention for a lot of really amazing people in my life and the Women's and Gender Studies courses, I would still have the mindset of a perpetrator. And I don't think that that is a rare thing for young men. And I think that we are doing young men a disservice if we do not offer them the tools to leave behind that mindset and to move forward. In an empowered and healthy way. And I think that, again, this multicultural requirement can provide that context and can at least provide a community where we are more able to hold each other accountable. And we all know that we have at least been provided the tools to establish how to get to a healthy sexuality. Moving on to our experience so far as, again, a group of undergrads who have been kind of trying to push this along with the UO Coalition. I'd really like to thank them for all their hard work. As many of you know, or maybe you don't, there was a meeting with President Gottfredson in which some undergrads were there, as well as grad students and faculty members. And there we were told that on this specific demand to expand the multicultural requirement, that we should come to University Senate. Now we're being told by University Senate that there's another council to go to that...
No, that's not what we're saying. That we have to understand how it becomes a multicultural requirement.
Correct, and to let me speak, please. Yeah. What I specifically heard from one of your members emailing was specifically that we had to go to the undergraduate council at some point, which is perhaps a body. And if that's incorrect, please correct us.
That is correct, but that's essentially a committee that's part of the Senate.
Right. So yeah. That's again the kicker. It's another committee, and I know that it is a committee, and as I understand legislative bodies, they do retain all powers held by their committees. So as I understand it, the University Senate, if you think this is a good idea, you can do it. Let me be clear. You can do it. And you might think that the president will veto it. I say let him try. I mean, right now, if you're shaking your head no, that's totally fine, and I understand. Well, if you won't, okay, that's awesome. Then what I'm hearing here is maybe that we got incorrect information from one member, and that perhaps you all are willing to take up this issue right now. Not right now, obviously, this is a forum. I understand it has to be legislation. But perhaps you are willing to work on this and push this issue and get it done soon. And perhaps sooner than, say, the end of next year or the end of the year after that, at which point a curriculum will have to be developed, at which point we won't even see the implementation of this requirement until 2018, when anyone I know at this campus has most likely graduated. Thank you. And so this is actually really refreshing and reassuring to hear, and I do appreciate that some Senate members are here and telling me that this is possible and that we can move forward, and we can do so fairly quickly. Because what I was hearing from, again, one individual member, and I will preface that, I know there's about 60 members on University Senate, was that we were going to have to go down to a committee of yours, the undergraduate council, speak with them, work with the provost, do that for on and on and on, perhaps with a committee that wasn't fully filled and couldn't reach quorum, until we came back to the University Senate, at which point it might be approved, and at which point it might be approved by President Gottfredson.
I'd love to know who that member was.
I don't have that information offhand.
Good. I'm just...
Please talk to Senator Schlegel.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
Okay, she'll let you know specifically, though. Great.
We will communicate about this, and I see actually one of our senators right there who just responded. So everybody knows the students are in the Senate. They are our largest constituency, right? 23,500 and counting, or whatever the specific number is now. So let's be aware of that. You are
Absolutely.
part of the Senate, right?
Absolutely.
And it's our university, and you can make motions too.
Yes,
right?
And I have been in contact with Senator Schlegel, and our group has. And so that was, I'm sure she'll speak more to the situation and probably better than I can, but I am excited to hear that the University Senate can, in fact, pass this in a reasonable amount of time and that it can be presented to President Gottfredson within a reasonable amount of time, preferably before the end of, let's say, next year.
Thank you. Sarah Wire.
Is this a good level? Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. All right, so I've been hearing a lot of wonderful things at this forum, a lot of things that are being pressed forward. One of the things that also concerns me is the undercurrent within our social world, which kind of perpetuates these kinds of events. So I hope you don't mind me reading notes off my phone. Nationally, feminism is widely considered to be a dirty word. There was a PR battle, we lost it. What troubles me as a student, in my humble position as an undergraduate student at the University of Oregon, is that so many of my fellow students do not know what feminism is or what it means, that sexual violence is often blamed on the victim, that the difference between gender and sex seems to be a specialized upper division academic knowledge, and that the virgin whore false dichotomy is alive and well in our society. This issue is larger than a task force. It is rooted in lack of education, lack of awareness, and the reality of living in a hegemonic patriarchal system that assigns socially constructed characteristics to men and women that are then tragically taken as truth. Education is the answer to this. So many of our students go through their college years without any exposure to women and gender studies, without, as Anna Bird said earlier, or was quoted earlier, an opportunity for change in perspective. Making a general education requirement to take a gender class, and there are so many gender classes in a variety of different departments on campus, upper and lower division, is, I believe, the most effective way to spread awareness, and not just interested parties, as we are here, but the entire student body that seems to fall short of getting this information. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is John Bonine. Oh.
Hi, I'm Caroline Farrell. I'm a professor at the law school, along with John Bonine. And so we're bringing the law perspective. And so what we've been working on is, with hopes that it won't take 11 years, revisions to the Student Conduct Code. And John has been working furiously, and then I have been following up and giving the input, hopefully, that is especially represented by the coalition. Though I haven't had to do much that has in any way changed what he had, other than just a few extra words, because John is a very good feminist. So what we're concerned about is that we have actually drafted some parts of the code to revise it, to take into account making it easier for the complainant to go forward, so that they have an ability to go forward without fear that it's going to be a disaster for them. And right now, the way the Student Conduct Code is set up, it is definitely set up in favor of the accused. And so what we've tried to do is balance it out. Obviously, what we've drafted is a beginning, but it's a beginning that we hope will help us move forward faster than even a year. I would like to think we're going to make changes in the code that help complainants within, hopefully, that second meeting of the Senate. And so I thought I'd turn to John and what he's been working on here on this.
Thank you. I just sent the latest draft, and when I say latest draft, I'm talking about apologies to those who have been speaking. The draft was in partly just worked on during this meeting, so it's really drafty, but it's been a lot of work for many days. And so I've sent it to Lisa, who's going to put on the screen a couple things. The first of all, go to the other one, please. I want to thank the gentleman in the third row here who spoke about institutional molasses. And he's absolutely right that the Senate has the power to do things without its committees. Now, because of that, I took the radical position at the last Senate meeting that I would put forth a notice of motion, the possibility of making massive changes in the Student Conduct Code next week if the Senate were to vote 2/3 to allow it. It's not clear that we should do this. There may be some parts of it that we could agree upon without waiting further. There may be other things that really should be looked at by the task force, by different groups, and so forth. I think that's up to the body. But I wanted to get the process started because, as Caroline Farrell said, as lawyers, we also like to be out in the front of activism, but we do it by going back to the law books and seeing what needs to perhaps be done. And so I talked to students at the ASUO Senate last week, and there's a group there that wants to work on this. And I went ahead with Caroline, and we simply kept working on the document. So what I want to show you is not all the details. I want to give you the idea. And it's a draft, and then maybe in the next day we can come up and decide, yeah, we've got it worded right, and send it around to some people. And then the question is, how do we send it around?
John, it can be posted on the Senate website, and everybody can go there.
That may be a good solution.
Absolutely no problem. That's all the motions are posted on the Senate website. All you have to do is go to the home page and look under motions, a sidebar at the left.
But knowing that, while those of us who have some gray hairs thought we were doing really cool stuff by figuring out the internet and email, the reality is that 30% of the people in this room use Facebook. And what we need to do, frankly, is get the Senate tied in with Facebook so that people can see what's going on rather than being told to go to a website. But that's a different subject. Let's go to my table of contents here. So I just want to run through the kinds of things that are here. The first one is mandatory off-campus jurisdiction. This is actually, we went through the Student Conduct and Community Standards Committee last week, and the committee voted on a change partially from the administration and then added stuff that Caroline and I put together, and that they agreed to have mandatory off-campus jurisdiction of any sexual assault issue by a student, no matter where it might happen, no matter if it's a fraternity or if it's in Florence, Oregon. Nevertheless, the point is to think about whether students in this university, their culture in part is what they do wherever they do it is a university issue, because they might well take it back to the campus as well, or they might, in any event. That's the first one. I did find an additional amendment that I think we're going to need to do, and I'm going to have to ask during the Senate meeting next week that we also do that one. Second, equality and procedural rights. This is one of the things that Professor Farrell mentioned. Among other things, a notification not just to the accused, but notification to the complainant that the accused has been notified, various things like that. Advisors, providing equal access to advisors for the complainant in a sexual assault case as to the accused. And by equal access, we're talking, and we've discussed this with members of the coalition as well, the question of, if you are a complaining student, you basically cannot, I can be corrected, but as I understand it, cannot go to the Office of Student Advocacy and get any help because of conflict of interest, only the accused. Well, then where does that leave a complaining student? And part of the answer is to support outside nonprofit organization to help do that, and to make that not just if it happens during the budget cycle, but actually a mandatory part of the code, that access to an advisor must be provided.
I'd like to add there that we have been in communication with yet another law professor, Merle Weiner, who has suggested that domestic violence clinic may be a good place to locate a lawyer or a third-year law student supervised by a lawyer that would help anytime a complainant bringing a claim of sexual assault is involved.
And the
to have the same access, but from a different place as the accused would have.
The domestic violence clinic basically is it's graduates. All law students are graduate students. It is an educational clinic in which people do the real work of lawyers, and so it would be like the Office of Student Advocacy, but would be available on the side of victims. Cross-examination, again, a major issue. I should say that these are not my ideas, most of them. These are ideas in the Groves report that was commissioned by the Vice President for Student Affairs and was issued on December 16th. It's also on the Senate website. What I did was to go through the report and not just find the couple places that he said we should change this, but find the little sentences and footnotes where he said this is a problem. And so I've put them into proposals. Well, then we should change this perhaps also. And also the April 2011 Dear Colleague letter from the Office of Civil Rights. And so as you look at this document, you're going to end up finding a lot of references. So I'm actually asking people to do a lot of homework. Let me go on. Cross-examination, the question of cross-examining a victim or an alleged victim, having the accuser cross-examine, having the accuser's lawyer cross-examine. These are terribly traumatizing experiences. There are various solutions. I don't know if we've covered them all here, but we've tried to deal with that as an issue. Decision-making issues, choice of procedure. Should the victim be allowed to demand that there be a formal hearing, or should it be entirely in the hands of the accused student? I don't want to have a formal hearing. I just want to meet with the director. And so we've addressed that. Bias, at the present code, it says the accused student can complain that the office, well, basically to say the Office of Community Standards is biased and I want my case decided elsewhere, but the person, the victim of sexual assault can't complain about bias. And so that's in there. Statute of limitations, this is an interesting little thing that I came up with. There is no statute of limitations for academic dishonesty. You can have your degree revoked even after you've graduated, and you can certainly go through 4 years of university, and something you did as a freshman can come down on you as a senior. Sexual assault is 6 months. Everything else is 6 months, except for basically academic dishonesty, and I think one other item. So I've gone and put in there, except in case of a sexual assault. Burden of proof persuasion, this is something that the Vice President of the University came up with as a recommendation from the Groves Report and from the Office of Civil Rights recommendation of 3 years ago, and that is that expulsion should not have a special high burden of persuasion, which it does right now. It should be the same as any other standard, a preponderance of the evidence.
And I want to add to that that is actually a specific motion that is coming to the Senate this next time. And I do hope we get to that one, because if we can make at least that one change in the Student Conduct Code absolutely this time, I think that's very important. It's something that we're actually out of compliance, clearly out of compliance.
Just to let everybody know for information, there are 2 motions already on the docket May 28th related to the Student Conduct Code, and those will be considered and voted on. What John's proposing, as he said, the rules would have to be suspended by a vote of 2/3, and then everything he's talking about now could go before the Senate May 28th.
Right, and the 2 that will go are the first, mandatory off-campus jurisdiction, but without the 1C that I think we need to add through a suspension of the rules perhaps, and the burden of persuasion. Then there's the one about sanctions, which basically raises the issue that was raised earlier here about whether, I think by Professor Fried, by whether education or her graduate student, whether educational journaling is an adequate response in a case of sexual assault. And so the proposal is perhaps we should say that's the one time when that's not by itself allowed to be a remedy, although it could be part of a remedy. Mediation, as proposed, I think, in the Groves Report or in the April 2011 Dear Colleague letter from the Office of Civil Rights, that mediation should not be appropriate in this, and so we have an amendment there. Some small clarifications on consent. We're not changing anything, basically, about standards. What we're trying to do is to fix what we see as procedural problems. In the actual standards in the code, for the most part, are very progressive in this country. And then single episode, again, a little clarification. Now, having done that, I'm going to stop, except to just ask Lisa to slowly scroll so you can see what you're in for if you download this document and try to participate. So first of all, this is a memo explaining what's in the changes. And so just keep moving. And what you're going to see is there's references to specific parts of the code. There are references to where this idea comes from for a change. Go faster. Because, yeah, it's seven pages, single-spaced explanation. Okay, now skip to the other document just so people can see how they might interact with this document if they find it useful to do so. I just want, again, to do a scroll thing.
And I want to emphasize that what we're really doing here as far as, again, not major substantive changes as much as evening the playing field, to make it so in a situation involving sexual assault, and in a few cases other things as well, but mainly sexual assault and sexual misconduct, as is described in the code, that because of the nature that's involved in that, it's really a very different thing than accusing someone of cheating. And it seems like that often that person is put on trial, the victim. And so therefore we want to make sure that in fact, the code provides that it's fair on both sides.
So if you just scroll either up or down until you get to a nice yellow and red and blue area, keep going up, stop. So for example, the code is in black. If I'm proposing the removal of words, it's just struck out with a line. But if Carolyn and I are proposing addition of words, you're going to find them being red underlined. And then you're going to find in blue an explanation of why this would be useful. Some of that explanation is in the memo, some of it's right here. Why is there yellow? Believe me, Carolyn and I have trouble getting our law students to read legislation. They hate it. It is so boring. And so when you just go through this, you're going to say, I don't want to read this code. I've tried to highlight in yellow everything involving sexual misconduct. So you can actually ignore anything that's not in yellow, and you can still interact with this code. So if you scroll a little bit, again, another one or two examples of, the other direction, of where there are changes, you get the sense.
Skip over all of that.
Yeah, right. I actually want you to get to, keep going. I'm going to go to another one slow until you get to a long red insert, which is going to be perhaps controversial but interesting. Not that one, the next one. Next one. Student rights. Slow down, slow down. Okay, so what we have here is a whole series of rights that the accused has in terms of the right to be informed of the charges, the right to call witnesses. Now move up a little bit higher and stop. So what we've done here is to create a parallel set of rights of a victim of sexual assault or an alleged. That is, similar things. The right to call witnesses, the right, among other things, not to have retaliation against her or him, and so forth. So these are the kinds of things. Believe me, this is actually productive if some of you will engage with these documents and get in there and say, I don't like this sentence. Why didn't you do this? What about this other part? I think it would make a real difference before the meeting. And perhaps some of you would say, look, 8 of your issues really need to be held over to the task force. But there's 5 of these that you really could do right now, and they're important to get done, or whatever your views might be. But I think that's the way to help solve, again, the problem identified by the future legislator in the third row, that sometimes sending it to a committee is the death of things. Sometimes sending it to committee is where you really get things done, and we have to figure out what the answer is for that. So,
thank you so much. Let me just say that John, I know for a fact John has spent an enormous amount of time and given an enormous amount of energy to this, and Carolyn as well. And these are not easy matters, and they've been doing this on quite a short timeline. Also, to let you know that John, he mentioned it, but I want to make sure everybody knows because I actually walked over with him to the Student Senate meeting. So the students were approached first with this. There has been as much of a process as we could have in the short time that there has been. Also to that future legislator in the third row, Jeremy Hedlund, I would like to say that I want to make clear what I said, and it may not have been clear. So even to make it more clear, that student senator can bring a motion on May 28th. And if the body agrees to suspend the rules, because it's not a timely motion, but the body can suspend the rules, and that motion can be considered. There needs to be wording, though, before it goes. And so if there could be wording for a motion, if a student senator wants to bring that, I'm happy also to work with the person, the Senate exec would be. That's our job. So please be in touch, and we would be glad to work with you. Great. We have one more person, and did you? Oh, okay, that's fine. Please. Could you just speak through the mic so we can? Yeah, in order for the people who are live streaming to hear.
Hi, my name is Sandy Weintraub. I'm the Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards in the Office of Dean of Students. It's actually my job to facilitate this process. It's my job to work through the code, to actually go through the entire code, and it's my job to protect students, to make sure that they have the procedural rights, to make sure that we have a due process, to make sure that everyone on every side of any student conduct issue is treated fairly. I just want to make it very clear that we in the Office of Dean of Students and me personally want to work with Professor Bonine, want to work with the students to create positive change of the Student Conduct Code. The Student Conduct Code needs change. There's no doubt about that. I know there's been some comments before about a lengthy process it's taken to do that change. Most of that happened before I was here, and frankly, in the month that I've been here, we've gotten more through the committee and change than had happened in quite a long time, and I'm very proud of that. And a lot of that is thanks to a lot of collaborative work with my office and people like Professor Bonine. I just want to make it very clear that we are not against students and we are not against faculty on this issue. We want to work with you to make a code as good to everyone on campus as it possibly can be. What I offer is to meet with Professor Bonine, to meet with Professor Farrell, and we've already set up a meeting, and to meet with students who are interested in this issue, to make changes that are, as it's been spoken about many times in this meeting, not solely reactionary, but also things that will support a good process now and into the future. The code is complicated. Our process is complicated, and it can be better for students. I believe in my heart it can be better for students. I know it can. But I just want to caution a rush on this many sections of the code within a week time period without collaboration with the people whose task it is, whose job it is to actually execute this process. I want to work with Professor Bonine and all the other faculty members who are working with him. I want to work with the ASUO students. I know that many of you on the task force from Senate are here today. I was working with the ASUO advisor. I want to set up a meeting as soon as I can. I just want to make sure that any changes that are made actually work. I want to make sure that any changes that are made actually work within the processes that are there. And I also want to make sure to let everyone know who has a question about what type of misinformation is out there about the code, about our process, and about the way we interact with students who report and students who are accused of violations of the Student Conduct Code. I put myself out there as somebody whose job it is to be an expert about that code, to answer questions about that. I care deeply about the issues that are being spoken about today. I know my colleagues do as well. We want to be in collaboration. We will be in collaboration. I just want to make sure that's clear, because I think that in this rush to change, in this rush to get things done, to react to one issue, I want to make sure that the entire process, and it is a complicated one, and there's a lot of different areas why that's complicated, are not accidentally made something that's more difficult for reporters, something that makes it into more an adversarial or more of a criminal process than it already is. And I just want to caution members of the University Senate to, not caution, I want to invite members of the University Senate to collaborate and to make sure that we're doing this right. We need to get it done, but it needs to be done right. And I'm not saying we need to send it back to committee and delay it for years. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we need to make sure that the people who are involved in actually executing that code, that we have the opportunity to work with you to get that done. So I just wanted to respond to that because I think there's a notion out there that that we are not willing to change. We absolutely are. And we're absolutely wanting to be a part of the process, and I look forward to doing so. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to make clear the situation that we're in, John Bonine has the right as maker of the motion, and perhaps he'll put it forward with Carolyn Farrell. And the last thing I heard is that that will be put forward on May 28th. So what I would suggest is that you meet with them. That's fantastic. And there are a number of ways forward. It can be put before on May 28th. If it is put before on May 28th, a time limit can be written in. A time limit for the effect of action to take place, right? So there are ways to do this so that people don't feel we're waiting, a long time for it. And all of that can be built into legislation. It can have meaning and purpose. But let's all work together and include the Senate President and the Senate Exec in it too, because that's the way we will have the best meeting on May 28th. So copy me on your emails, and we will copy the Senate Exec too. Thank you so much. Our last member of the speakers list is Bill Harbaugh. Then we will have comments from those participating from the floor.
So I'll be very brief. So first of all, I don't think I can have anything to add to John Bonine's efforts on this. I ask people to pay attention to those. I also don't have anything to add to the comments that were made at the beginning of the meeting by Carol Stable. Jennifer Fried and Carly Smith, and I really hope that people will focus on those comments as they think about how to move forward here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to open the discussion to the floor. I see Randy Sullivan, Ian McNeely. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. These are the first hands I saw. If you could please go to the microphone if possible and line up in that order. The next hand, I saw Professor Kramer. Then I saw, yes, and there was someone, yes, please. So if you could come to this mic in this order, why don't we just go back and forth? I think the first hand was Randy.
First of all, I'm a senator, and I would like to apologize to the students of the University of Oregon. From where I stand, it seems that we have failed you. We have not been proactive to work with you and the administration and give your safety the very high priority it deserves. And I apologize for that. And I hope to work to change that. I think I speak for all the senators that we hope to work to change that. I'm heartened and cynical by what I see going forward. We need to have a reality check about what we are and are not capable of. We are capable of great things. We are also flawed and capable of great errors and unintended consequences. To quote Senator Sam Nunn, yesterday's solutions are today's problems. The ideas I'm hearing are great, and I'm sure they will help greatly. But if we think that an ad hoc committee or changes to the student conduct code, one time, one shot, will deal with this. That's not the way this kind of institutional and societal change happens. It needs multiple cycles of changing things, evaluating how that worked, looking at unintended consequences, changing them, tweaking them, changing them again. I'm a senator, so I can only speak from the point of view of a senator. By the way, I apologize for being late. I'm a teacher, too, and I was teaching. What I'd like to see is a standing committee, not an ad hoc committee, not a task force, a standing Senate committee for student safety, whose job it is to do exactly that, to monitor all these processes. The Senate cannot pass off its responsibility to do that, to stay seated from here on, a standing committee that will look at and evaluate all the systems for student safety, report back to the Senate as often as possible. This is working, this is not. I'm talking about not what happens next year, but what happens in the next 10 years and from here on out, to make sure that we don't do in the moment do these great things. They're great things, don't get me wrong. And then sink back into complacency and think we've dealt with the problem. This is a big problem. I wish I could tell you we could do these things and everything would be all better. It will be better, but not all better. It's good steps in the right direction, but it's first steps. Thank you.
Okay, just to let everybody know is that our tech people have to leave at 5, so we really only do have until 5. We would be glad to extend it, but we were instructed that we could not go beyond 5 because of the resources in the room. So for these latter comments, if we could just maybe keep our comments to about 2 minutes. I just want to make sure everybody has a chance. Well, thank you for your comments anyhow. We thank you. Ian McNeely.
Yeah, I'm Ian McNeely, professor of history. I spent about the past 5 years of my life on curriculum development The first 3 of those as chair of the Undergraduate Council, which is the body that normally would consider things like a change to the multicultural requirement. In the last 2 years as Associate Dean for Undergraduate Education in the College of Arts and Sciences, which offers about 85% of the Gen Ed credit on campus. I want to say 3 things real quick. Number 1, to volunteer my services as a consultant on curriculum development. I know the Senate side, which is all about establishing academic principles, articulating what we're trying to do when we educate students, and on the administrative side, how to find qualified instructors, recruit, pay them, find classrooms for them to teach in, to cope with 5,300 new students every year, and to figure out how all of them can get the education they need. Number 2, I want to suggest that there are other things we can do that stop short of changing the multicultural requirement, even if that's what we ultimately decide to do. I had a discussion yesterday with Lizzie Reese in my office. She's head of the Women's and Gender Studies program, about possibly making a common reader and building, that's a book that would be assigned to all incoming freshmen, and building curriculum on that draws from the expertise of Professor Fried, of Professor Stabile, of Bonnie Mann in philosophy, who teaches love and sex. It's going to take a long time, and it's not just administrative molasses, it's not just stonewalling from guys who wear ties. There's real good reasons for being deliberate about changing the multicultural requirement. Let me just very briefly summarize why. We have 831 Gen Ed classes that we offer on campus. If you do just a crude search, about 40 of them have the words gender, sex, sexuality, and women in the title. It would be a trivial matter just to say if the word gender, women, or sex appears in the title, you got to take one of these courses before you get out of here. We still have the problem that we find with the only other mandated universal class that we require of all students, writing 121, 122, 123. Freshman comp. You're supposed to take that freshman year. A lot of students don't get around to it until the end of senior year. What that means is if we change the multicultural requirement, we're going to have a lot of people waiting to graduate and trying to get their sex requirement out of the way 3 or 4 years after it would have done any good. The responsible way, I think, to do this, and again, I hasten to volunteer my services, is to work through the committee, to have the undergraduate council formulate what it is that we're looking for in these classes, to have the committee on courses scan those 831 courses to figure out which ones do the job already, to provide course development support if we have to create new courses, and then to figure out how to hire the instructors to serve 20,000 undergraduates on this campus. Yes, the Senate can change the rules tomorrow. You can change them today if you want. That would create an adversarial relationship with the administration. I straddle both sides, all right? I am willing to be the mediator. I'm the low guy on the totem pole of the administration, and I used to be the top guy in the undergraduate council. Seek me out. I'm happy to help.
Next, I think the next hand was yours, and then we go over to this side.
Hi, my name is Dana Rungley, and I want to speak just directly to that, everything that Ian just brought up. So we already have a lot of scholars who work on this issue. You mentioned many of them, right? But I don't think we need to go through all of that bureaucratic stuff of having the course on committees and the committees on the course and all of that stuff, right? Because all that we need to do is get it cross-listed with the WGS department so that the WGS department, who are the people who do this work, are in charge of what that curriculum says, right? If you were to have a math requirement, you would have it go through the math department, which is what it does, right? But also, we have to be committed to funding these. So I am currently one of the 5 GTFs in the WGS department who teaches basically the class that we're all talking about here. And I don't make ends meet every month, right? So you all know that the GTFF is currently working without a contract, right? We need to make sure that we're funding these classes so that the people who are actually teaching them are also well funded, and that we don't perpetuate inequality even within this class. It's trying to eliminate that kind of equality, or inequality, rather. right? So if you don't know about the GTFF bargaining, I would highly encourage you to educate yourself on it, right? Where all we're doing is fighting for a living wage. Also, like parental leave, right? We are unable. These are instances of inequality, right? Based also on sex that are institutional, and we can't keep separating these things out, right? The reason why this is becoming an issue right now is because it has become a crisis, right? This issue of which is an immensely important issue, right? This is what I'm writing my dissertation on. So I'm not trying to discount the issue of sexual violence on campus whatsoever. I would be the last person to do that, right? But this is not the only instance of institutional betrayal on this campus, right? You have a third of the classes being taught by graduate students, right, who are currently working without a contract. I mean, that's a problem. This is one instance, so there are at least 2 instances where the institution is under a crisis right now. And this is why I think that I hear the arguments in favor of taking time and to be more cautious, right? But as Jennifer Fried said, people have been working on this for years, right? It's not like we have to reinvent the wheel here on how to confront rape culture. We just have to talk to the people who are actually working on this, right? And the time is now. This is a particular time. It's a particular moment, right? You're right that it's not going to that we can't just let it sit in the Senate because then nothing is going to get done, right? Our experience with the bargaining table is that there is a huge discrepancy between what the administration says and what it actually does, right? President Gottfredson has come out and said that we should really support graduate students, that they should be at the top of our priorities, right? And then we go to the bargaining table and we're not even treated with a basic level of respect by the administration's bargaining team, right? So this is why this kind of knowledge, the knowledge of the institution's failure at different places, right, makes it so that this is why people who are pushing for a faster deadline, right, are pushing, right? Because it's not, you're right, the bureaucracies aren't going to work. This is a particular moment, a contingent moment in our campus's history. So I think that we really need to take advantage now. We have a responsibility to take advantage of it right now, and we need to be talking to the people, right, who do this work already. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. I've just got the word that we actually can stay in this room till 5:30. We will finish the live streaming, I believe, at 5, but we can stay till 5:30, which is great. So people are welcome to stay and continue the conversation till 5:30. We're now at about 7 minutes to 5. Professor Kramer's next.
Hi. I'm just going to be very brief. I'm a senator, and I want to speak to just further clarify what Dreiling's much amended amendment was about from the Senate's point of view. It actually has a lot in there that I don't think has been spoken to at all. But the point of it for most senators was to have Jennifer Fried and Carol Stabile included and respected by the university, because we thought a lot of the administrations, they were basically saying that they were not, objective. And many of us think their research is world class. So that was a part of this Senate resolution, just to be perfectly clear about that. The second point is that many on the Senate want to work on a course, but we also know the problems Ian just pointed out. And so we were hopeful that we could get a course and working on it, but that's separate from this resolution. But it doesn't mean we're not working on it. Lots of people are working on it. Third, as a senator, I went and listened to John Bonine's every last thing for several hours, and they're not controversial. We should do it next week. Look at it. They're a duh changes, okay? So don't let him confuse you that they're hard to read. They're simple, and they're right. And so that's easy to fix the conduct code. So I don't know if Sandy Weintraub actually read them yet, but they're not hard. They're nothing controversial. I'd like to see what they would be. But anyway, those are my points. The Senate is listening and trying to respond. Thanks.
And just so you all know, what happened is we had the Senate meeting. John presented his idea and in a kind of abbreviated form, and then those who remained, we said, well, let's go and talk over a meal, which we did, and I said, now we're going to go over to the Student Senate, and that's what we did. And so, this kind of interaction that we can have in the moment is often very important as a way of discussing, and we encourage you to go out and have conversations, please, throughout the campus. This is very, very important that there be this kind of interactivity across the entire campus. Again, it's our university, and we really need to have this dialogue continuing. And I hope that as many of you as can will attend the May 28th meeting when we will be deliberating and voting on many of these discussions, the result of them in legislation at that time. Please.
Hi. My name is Anna Kopic, and I am a transfer student and a member of Greek Life. And I would just like to say, as a transfer student, I can speak on the idea that this university is different when dealing with sexual assault and dating violence. It is swept under the rug much more commonly than my prior university. Not to say that this university is the only one guilty of sweeping these important issues under the rug, but it does speak to the fact that it is different and is being dealt with maybe not in the best way. I'd also like to touch on 2 points really quickly. I want to propose specific prevention using education as a tool, which seems to be a theme here. But I would like to point out that sexual harassment is not always physical. Harassment of any sexual nature is not okay. And today on campus there were some pastors, I saw a lot of you there, who were speaking against people who are homosexual and also women in general. And as I was standing there observing, one of the pastors approached me and said that the way I was dressed was asking to be raped and that I probably deserve it. And this was something that was observed by university members who most of the students stuck up for me and comforted me, whereas other university members who are much older and seemed part of the institution as employees did not even stop, whereas this was a loud statement. Clearly something could have been done about it. UOPD was there and saw, and that is harassment. So that's something that easily could have been fixed by telling them to get off campus, like now. And on the Greek life note, I am proud of my sorority, and they have gotten me through the toughest times of my life, and Greek life is not all bad. But that being said, sometimes but not always, Greek life and other student orgs provide environments and occasionally encourage behavior where assault may be more likely. The worst part about this is men and women don't even recognize their experiences as assault due to the sweep it under the rug mentality the university and these other institutions encourage. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from my fellow sisters about experiences they had on their weekend where they think of it as an unfortunate experience rather than something that could be brought forth to court and to the university as punishable behavior. People do not even know what is going on. They don't even know they've been violated in this way. They think it's just part of college culture, and that needs to change now. So I would like to propose something to educate students specifically on harassing behavior, harassment in general. I know it might be a lot to ask students to require a course on harassment, but I think it definitely needs to be worked into the curriculum, because I can't tell you how many times I witness street harassment every day in this community. It's unacceptable. And I just think maybe even if we can't do this through the whole university, require members of different organizations on campus to take even an online course on what harassment means in order to be initiated into that organization. So I'm just asking basically to educate your students on harassing behavior and sexual assault and dating violence. Knowledge is power, and so I really believe you should insist your students have the power to end sexual harassment and rape culture. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Do you have a direct question that's, please? Yeah, please take the mic. Thank you.
And how a lot of assault or a lot of sexual harassment is verbal. I've noticed it's also online, and I'd just like people to recognize that too. I saw an article on the Daily Emerald about a Twitter feed about UO, and it's like people making shout outs about students that they think are attractive, and some of it is friendly, but a lot of it seemed like just saying dirty stuff about students, providing their full name, but the people saying it are anonymous. And if I saw someone saying stuff about me that was sexual and derogatory and used my full name and like I couldn't do anything about it, like I would feel very upset. And so I think just the online stuff should maybe be thought about too.
Thank you very much. And next, Helena Schlegel.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Helena Schlegel. I'm a non-resident student here, and I'm an ASUO senator, and I also am a student senator on the University Senate, and I'm part of the Safer Education campaign as well. I'm sorry, I'm like a little short. But I guess I just wanted to kind of respond to some of the things said about the curriculum requirement, and specifically Ian's comments, and I think he left. But just like in reference to a book, I just want to point out that the same people who wouldn't read the book are probably the people who most likely need the education. And like I love assuming the best intentions, but like that's just the reality that anything that needs to be implemented needs to be mandatory for all students, so everyone can have the same education and the same opportunity and requirement to be educated on the matters. And like you said, like a lot of people are working on it, but I've actually been trying to reach out to people for 2 weeks now, and I finally got around to emailing the entire Senate listserv because that might have been most productive. But I just can't find people who are working on it. And I reached out to the Committee on Courses and Undergraduate Council and multiple senators and multiple faculty members, and I just can't find people who can help me and help like our campaign work on these issues. And I think it's kind of going along with what Jeremy said with like the whole bureaucratic system, and we can't find a way to implement this change that we want to make by not necessarily like right this instant, but productive implemental change like through University Senate. And that's been a struggle of mine. And since sending out the email to the listserv, I've gotten more responses, but I've also gotten like threats that if we did this without the help of undergraduate council, that then it wouldn't be passed, and that the president wouldn't sign on to it. When I was in a meeting with the president and he said he supported it. And so I just like get multiple like different messages from different people, and it's very frustrating as a student when I'm getting different responses to the same questions in different environments. And so kind of generally, I completely respect that this is a long process and that this needs to be done right first so we don't have to go back and change it. And so I do welcome like all the help of the professionals and the faculty members that work on this daily and teach these courses, because I think as the student-run campaign that we welcome your insight and your knowledge on these subjects, but also to recognize that this is a timely thing and that if we just keep pushing it under the rug with needing to gather more insight and have more conversations, that it won't ever change, and this will be a multi-year process without ever implementing a course. And so both balancing like the content and the responsibility we have to make a good motion with the timeliness and the importance of passing this without a 5-year deadline. Thanks.
Let me just make a comment again before we have a round of applause, which is just to say that motions can include time limits. So if you, and those time limits, if action is not affected, they can be extended with certain conditions. Okay. So let's work together to craft a motion that you would like to put forward, or because you're a student senator.
I won't be next week, but yeah.
Great. And well, whoever it might be, but there are ways forward. It's not so simple as just, it can't be done. It can be done, and we can do it in the right way, and we can work together to do it, and it can have timeliness as part of the actual legislation. Thank you so much. Thank you. Please.
Hi, I'm Mary Wood. I'm a professor in the English department, and I'm also a member of the Coalition to End Sexual Violence at the U of O. And I actually wanted to make a very specific recommendation about the task force that has to do with the fact that different social groups of students are affected differently by sexual assault. And just an example of that is that recently there was a Bureau of Justice special report that showed that 1 in 5 white women report sexual assault. For African American women, it's 1 in 15. And so I think that has to be part of the conversation, that that groups are affected differently, and that particularly for groups that have a long history of societal betrayal as well as institutional betrayal and throughout history, it's really important to keep that as awareness as part of the conversation, and especially also for LGBTQ students as well, for students with disabilities, and especially international students as well, who are particularly at risk, and there needs to be cultural sensitivity around helping and reaching out to these populations of students. And so my recommendation is that there be someone on the task force who is acknowledged to be a specialist in cultural difference in the history of racism and homophobia in particular, and ableism, and have that continue to be part of the conversation that we're having. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please.
Hi there. So my name is Abigail Leader. I'm the Director of Sexual Violence Prevention and Education here on campus with the Office of the Dean of Students. And I've been in this position for 8.5 years. I've done a lot of work on this topic on campus. I feel really heartened by what I'm hearing in terms of the commitment to do better as a whole. And I'm really interested in that. I feel like there's so much energy right now to make that happen. And I also just really feel like I want to acknowledge the people that are actually doing this work on a daily basis, like responding to survivors at 3 o'clock in the morning, and spending the time really thinking really critically on how we can do this on this campus with 5,000 incoming new students every year, and how do we get them the actual education to make these changes. And I feel like there's a lot of really good work that's been done on this issue, and there's a long way left to go. I feel some concern that there's going to be a lot of proving what we're doing and needing to some infighting around, who did what and why didn't we do it better in the past. And I'm really interested in moving forward. I totally understand specific incidents, and I totally understand that we're not the ones that are actually raping people. And I really think that it is all of our responsibility, and that I certainly can't do it alone. And I want to acknowledge, like, within the Office of the Dean of Students, there are amazing people doing this work on campus. And I really want partnerships. I really want to, those of us that know and understand the systems from the inside, to work with the people that have been doing the research to find the ways that we can actually become a model. I think it's possible. I think there are so many enough passionate people on this campus, but I think we really need to come together to work on it, as opposed to pointing fingers around who did what and why we didn't. Although I think at the same time, it is useful. I want this critical eye. I do. I want all of this, because that's the only way we're going to make a difference. But I want to encourage you all to continue to care. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Please.
Hi, I'm Karen Creighton. I'm a faculty in the PE Rec department, and before teaching at the university, I worked for 5 years at Women's Space as the women's advocate. So, yes, educational issues. Also, as a member of the union, I'm very aware of the power dynamic at this university. I've been learning more, and I just wanted to mention that it affects not only students. I had a fellow faculty member years ago who was stalked by a community member on campus. Long story short, she had to hire lawyers to protect herself from the university lawyers who were telling her basically to shut up so the problem would go away. And having worked at Women's Space, I went to her and I said, look, you need your own lawyer. So lots of good stuff. Thank you so much to people who are making this move fast, because as a crisis counselor, as a women's advocate, I know that it can be life and death depending on the minutes, the hours, the days. So I was horrified to hear the part about how the student handbook is now, that basically the person who has been violated is then put on trial. And that's horrific. That's horrible. I can tell you thousands of stories of how that would ruin lives. So what I would like to put out is however possible, whatever possible, next week. If you can change those pieces in the handbook, you will not only improve lives, but you will save lives. I'll just finish. I had a student 2 terms ago, being in PE, attendance is a requirement. She asked if it would be, well, first she sent me this email, and then she asked if it would be okay if she took it easy in the workout, and then when she came to class, she explained that she had been date raped up in Corvallis and had almost died had her friend not saved her. So, and she was asking very apologetically if she could take it easy in class. I don't know what she followed through with, but we're talking life and death stuff, and if next week, this coming Wednesday, I will be a much happier person, and we will have greatly improved lives just by doing that one piece. So if we do nothing else, if we do that one piece next week, we're using our power, not losing it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Please.
Hi, I'm Michael Stern from German and Scandinavian, and I'm afraid what I have to say might not be popular. I would like to speak to a certain elephant in the room, and it speaks really to what Jennifer was saying about institutional betrayal and as well Megan Burke's statement about particularity. One of the things that's been going on in my conversations with colleagues and students about this is that people have really wondered why this case becomes an exception, right? Why this case, in a sense, stands out. And I think it shouldn't, in a way, because I think that the problem is across the board horrendous and unacceptable. But one of the things that I think is going on here is that there were other interests at play that, in a sense, negated our response as an institution. I think that the administration should tell us why the response was delayed, why there was money to be made on this, why, at a university where I've been a teacher here for 12 years, we have a first obligation to the safety of our students, and it's completely unacceptable to me, one, that a woman can't feel safe on campus, and two, that the athletes took the fall for a response. And so the problem for me is that we have a relationship with money on this campus that has created a situation where the safety of our students comes second to donor interests. And I don't care if that's popular or not.
Thank you. Let's see, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Kroll. I'm an undergraduate student, senior, graduating with International Studies and Romance Languages. Thank you. Thank you. Made it. So I'm going to put it a little bit of a bigger context of what I've been learning in my undergraduate degree and high school. I come from Eastern Oregon. I went to, thanks, all of us Eastern Oregon folk out here. I left my junior year of high school to do an exchange abroad for a year. In preparation, we, through the program, get a lot of advice from our counselors, and I went to Latin America. I went to what is often called a developing country, and I was told that, especially as a girl, young woman, 16-year-old, to protect myself. I'll have a lot of reasons to protect myself. You can drink in this country, and so you'll probably go out to always watch your drink, to wear certain kinds of clothes. You'll get catcalled. You'll get followed. And I was told this in the context that where I'm from and the country I'm from, this doesn't happen, as if it happens elsewhere. So I felt, now looking back, it feels very naive to think about this. In my personal experience, growing up where I came from, I have a lot of privileges that have protected me and a family that has protected me and kept me very safe in my upbringing. So I went to this country and experienced a lot and came back. And I came to college. I went to Linfield College in McMinnville my freshman year, and I had a class required of me to take about these issues. It happens. There are colleges that have multicultural requirements on sexuality, sex education, relationships, abuse, assault, all of those things. And it was wonderful. I transferred to U of O. That wasn't a requirement of me. I know public universities have a lot more leniencies and flexibility, which a lot of students appreciate. And over the past couple years, I'm really surprised that I have to do those same exact things that I was told I would do in this poor country and developing country at my university. That I have to walk with someone on 19th Street. I have to avoid the cemetery to go home. I have felt safer in capital cities and developing countries than I have on my own campus. So I think that naivete needs to be redressed. I think often we forget to tie in the things we're learning about and thinking about in our classes to our real lives. Sometimes we think like, I left the classroom, I can just set that aside for now. And I challenge students to connect those things. We do. We connect those things that we're learning, graduating. Now, how do we use these things? I challenge faculty and staff, administration, professors, to take this issue and continue to, some of you have a lot of expertise, so I'm not talking particularly to you, but those that don't have expertise in gender, in institutional violence, in sexuality, in relationships, that don't have that kind of expertise, to learn. Why does this multicultural requirement have to just be for students?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Please.
Hello, my name is Amanda Halford, and I am a 2012 undergraduate in sociology with an emphasis on crime and deviance. I have been removed, so to speak, from the university for 2 years, but I have not left it. My heart is in the university. I still participate in the university, and the fact that it took a shock and awe incident to actually stimulate this is both it's disappointing is not the right word, but there's a discontentment there that it had to take a shock and awe. But look at our country. Shock and awe sells. The more graphic in nature a report is issued, the more that it gets out in publicity. So if it had to take a graphic, horrible incident to finally stimulate a response, then so be it. I apologize to the victim who had to endure that. That being said, we are right in the fact that this is not a new issue. This has been ongoing since before I was even a university student here. Since I was in high school, there were reports of sexual assault and sexual misconduct and general assault on campus. Up until recently, when the University of Oregon, which is now a police department, when they were a campus security, so to speak, they would issue responses with extreme victim blaming, saying, please do not walk alone. Please, if you do drink, know what you are doing, know your surroundings, as if the fact that that person's choice to drink was an invitation. I support many other people's here's recommendation on a course requirement. My own mind, in the fact that I felt like I was very open-minded, that I was very respectful of many different views outside my own, that I was a mediator and that I could moderate between different groups. I myself was surprised by taking different courses. One recommendation I have for the committee who is trying to pilot a education course or a requirement is this, that the material that is presented in that course, be it existing courses or pilot a new course, that we ask the question not, forgive me, I forgot my notes, This is not a matter of does this need to be shown or how much warning should we provide before we show this, but why does it need to be shown? We live in a society where shock in our cells, audio, film, and literature are disturbing to the point when there are no words to describe it. Topics are controversial and hard to hear, and in some cases the trauma associated with reading or hearing these trumps the benefit of having that discussion. So when we do discuss the material that is in play, let us make sure that that message is not overshadowed by the trauma or the shock factor that is about that topic, and that we address that message is not ignored in the material. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, would you like to make a statement,
I
please?
just want to say really quick, I'm a senior also. It's my 18th year, and I should be graduating hopefully. I started here in 95, and I never read the Student Conduct Code. I just read it because of the things that are going on and a class assignment. And I was shocked when I read it. I mean, the verbiage is horrible. It needs to be rewritten. That's obvious. But I think that we could do a class for freshmen called Student Conduct Code, right? And make it a multicultural conduct code. Because really, I think that I just still don't really understand some of what I'm reading when I read it. And I think I'm pretty smart. I mean, I've been around, so I just wonder, like, how many students are actually reading it until, it gets to the point where it's a problem. That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Please. We've got about 10 minutes left, and if anybody else would like to come to the microphone, I invite you to do so.
Hi again, I'm Amy. I already spoke once if you didn't already hear, but I do want to say something in addition to creating curriculum. Something that I've learned through my time at the university is when talking about this issue, it's much more meaningful and has much bigger impact when it's coming from somebody's peer than a faculty member. There's been numerous times, I was a former vice president of my sorority house, I'm a member of Greek Life, I'm involved in various campus organizations, and it took me stepping up and calling out my friends or peers that I didn't know in times where they made a statement that was inappropriate. It took me saying, hey, that's not okay. Kind of being that, person who's not very popular in the group at the time, making that awkward moment to really inflict change and have someone come up to me later and say, hey, thank you. I've been listening to that for years and I didn't know what to say to address my friends. And now I have a better idea. A lot of times when we have our faculty, they have extremely valuable knowledge, but I've noticed from my peers in various outlets that a lot of times they tend to tune out even the best intentions from adults who are giving this. So maybe thinking in a way to include students in this curriculum, whether it be sharing stories, having, student teachers for certain days of the class, so that this message is also coming from peers, because this change needs to start from within our student body. Otherwise, it's not really going to go anywhere. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation with whoever is making these courses, really consider the valuable impact of someone being told what is, right and wrong on our campus in regards to sexual violence from our own students.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Please.
I just got an email while I was sitting here from someone who wanted to remind us that this isn't just about the Student Conduct Code. It's also about students reporting acts of harassment by faculty members. And there are real serious problems and delays around that. And that is not a Student Conduct Code issue. So I think when we talk about ending sexual violence, we have to keep that in the picture too. And I wanted to speak to something that Abigail said quickly. I think we all think or want to think that there's going to be some magic bullet approach to this problem, right? Whether it's a single course or it's a common reader or it's, some other kind of policy, when what we need is like a broad spectrum antibiotic. We need lots of situations in which students and faculty and staff encounter these ideas. We need lots of ideas. We need a campus climate survey. We need SWOT. We need a course. We need lots of things that we can change the culture. We're not going to change the culture through one thing, and I think that that's part of what's so hard to wrap your head around. There are things that we can do in the short term, and I think that John and Caroline are right in saying we can change the student conduct code so that it is more equitable for the accused and complainants. But I think we have to move forward knowing that we have to be able to do a lot of things and be nimble in our thinking, and also think about how to assess the things that we're doing. Because I think that is another big problem at the University of Oregon, is that we want to do stuff, but we never step back and say, well, did that actually work? So that's all.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Please. Yes, we have time for five more minutes.
I am double dipping, so anybody else who hasn't spoken yet, please, I yield it to you. Okay. What Michael was saying, I got to thinking about, and I've been thinking about for a while, as we move to a donor-driven funding system, which we're doing, right? I think a lot of us are scared that it'll go away. And so when we act out of fear, a lot of times what we do is try to do the look good, because we think if we look good, the donors will give us money. Now, first of all, I want to reject that we should make ethical value judgments based on monetary. We're here to be a lamp, a university, and we don't make judgments based on that. However, given that, the look good is very naive in the first place. I mean, who's donors? Rich people. They're not stupid. Do you think they fall for dog and pony shows? No. These issues that come up are festering and will explode in your face like they have been. We're worried too much as an institution about the look good. You know what? If you do good, you don't have to worry about the look good. And these people know the difference. And we have to trust them. They will stay with us if we're honest. A lot of them are ducks. They love us. They will stay with us. We just need to open up and be honest with them. A brief example of the look good. There was a fire at the SRC. I got a private little notification on my email. I said, oh, I work out there. I want to go check it out. I went to the front page of the U of O website. There wasn't a thing about it there. A major fire, nothing about it. Just an example. The look good was more important than letting people, heaven forbid there was a fire. So, let's concentrate on doing good. We don't have to worry about the look good.
Thank you.